Hello everyone, welcome to Digital Communication Tutorials. In this video, I am going to discuss about Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure. Before I begin the discussion on Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization, I would like to first show you the conceptual model of the digital communication system. Here you can see we have a digital source that creates a set of message symbols which are fed to the transmitter part of the digital communication system. The transmitter part is made up of two subparts. The first one is a vector transmitter which takes the input symbols and converts them into signal vectors which are represented by Si. These vectors are then fed as inputs to the modulator that converts the vectors into signals, and these signals are represented by Si of t. The overall idea of converting this message symbol Mi into a message signal Si of t is supported by the Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure. So, to begin the Gram-Schmidt, we state the task of transforming an incoming message Mi into a modulated wave Si of t can be divided into two separate parts, first being a discrete time operation and then we have a continuous time operation. The justification of this is actually given by the Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure. To state, Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure permits the representation of any capital M energy signals as a linear combination of capital N orthonormal basis functions, where N is either less than or equal to M. That is to say, we may represent the given set of real valued energy signals which are S1 of t, S2 of t, etc. till Sm of t, each of duration capital T seconds in the form Si of t equals summation j varying from 1 to capital N Sij into phi j of t, where t varies between 0 to capital T and I varies from 1 to capital M. Please note, I is the number of input message signals. Here, Sij represents the coefficients of expansion and these are defined by Sij equals integration 0 to capital T Si of t into phi j of t dt, where I takes on the value from 1 to capital M and j takes on the value 1 to capital N. From this equation, you should note there are capital M input message signals and these signals are represented in terms of capital N basis functions. Coming to the basis functions, we have capital N basis functions and let them be represented as phi 1 of t, phi 2 of t, etc. till phi n of t, and they are said to be orthonormal in nature. That is, they can be represented as in the equation 3 shown here, which is integration 0 to capital T phi I of t into phi j of t dt equals 1 if I is equals to j and 0 if I is not equal to j. In equation 3, we actually state that each basis function is normalized to have unit energy. So, if you replace I is equals to j into the LHS of equation 3, you will have phi I of t into phi I of t, which you can write it as phi I square of t. So, integration of 0 to t phi I square of t dt is equal to the energy. So, when I set I is equals to j, the LHS of equation 3 represents the energy of phi I of t. The second condition in equation 3 states that the basis functions are orthogonal with respect to each other over the interval 0 to capital T. That is, when I is not equal to j, phi I of t into phi j of t applied over the integral should produce 0. This condition is actually called as the orthonormal condition. Coming back to equation 1, if we set the coefficients Sij for j varying from 1 to capital N as inputs to a system, then it is possible to create the input signal Si of t using the scheme that is shown in the diagram 2 here. That is, each of the coefficient forms an input to the branch of this system and each coefficient is multiplied by one of the basis function. That is, Si1 is multiplied by phi 1 of t, Si2 is multiplied by phi 2 of t and so on. So, when you look carefully at this diagram, you can see this system consists of a bank of capital N multipliers which are each supplied by its own basis function represented by phi j of t followed by a summer. This scheme may be viewed as performing a similar role to that of the second stage of the modulator in the transmitter of the conceptual model of the digital communication system. Moving on to equation 2. Once again, we can create a graphical representation of equation 2. That is, if the set of input signals Si of t operate as input, then we may use the scheme as shown here to create the coefficients as output. That is, if Si of t is the input, then if I multiply Si of t with phi 1 of t, phi 2 of t, etc. till phi n of t using the scheme as shown here, followed by an integrator, then the output of each branch will be one of the coefficient. A multiplier followed by an integrator is usually called as a correlator. So, we can view this system as a bank of capital N correlators. Lastly, to prove the Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure, we proceed in two stages. Let us start with stage 1. In stage 1, at first we have to establish whether or not the given set of signals, that is S1 of t, S2 of t till Sm of t, are linearly independent. If they are not linearly independent, then there exists a set of coefficients represented by a1, a2, etc. till am, not all of them equal to 0, such that it is possible to relate the coefficients and the signals using the equation as shown in equation 4 here. That is, a1 into s1 of t plus a2 into s2 of t, etc. am into sm of t equals to 0, applied over the condition t varying between 0 to capital T. Suppose that particularly we assume the signal Sm of t to be one of the dependent signal, then the coefficient Am will not be equal to 0. In such a situation, we can represent the dependent signal Sm of t as a linear combination of the remaining m minus 1 signals using the equation 5 shown here. That is, Sm of t is equals to minus of a1 divided by am into s1 of t plus a2 by am into s2 of t. Continuing in this fashion, we will have the last term given by am minus 1 divided by am into Sm minus 1 of t. So, equation 5 implies that the signal Sm of t can be expressed as a linear combination of the remaining m minus 1 signals. Right. So, at this stage, we have identified that Sm of t is one of the dependent signals. Consider next the remaining set of signals which are S1 of t, S2 of t, etc. till Sm minus 1 of t. Either this set of signals are linearly independent or not. If they are not linearly independent, then once again there exists a set of coefficients given by b1, b2, etc. till bm minus 1, not all of them being equal to 0, in such a way that we can write the coefficients and the signals related as in equation 6. That is, b1 into s1 of t plus b2 into s2 of t, etc. till bm minus 1 into Sm minus 1 of t equals to 0 over the condition t varying between 0 to capital T. Once again, let us assume the last signal, which is Sm minus 1 of t, is a dependent signal. In such a scenario, the coefficient bm minus 1 will not be equal to 0. So, once again we express the signal Sm minus 1 of t in terms of the remaining m minus 2 signals as shown in equation 7 here. That is, Sm minus 1 of t equals minus of b1 divided by bm minus 1 into s1 of t plus b2 divided by bm minus 1 into s2 of t, etc. till the last term, which is bm minus 2 divided by bm minus 1 into Sm minus 2 of t. So, now we have established that out of capital M input message signals, Sm of t and Sm minus 1 of t are dependent on the remaining signals. Now, let us continue and test the remaining signals, that is S1 of t, S2 of t till Sm minus 2 of t for linear independence. And continuing in this fashion, at one point we will eventually end up with a linearly independent subset of the original set of signals, and let this linearly independent subset be represented by S1 of t, S2 of t, etc. till S capital N of t, where quite obviously n can either be equal to or less than capital M. If all of our original input symbols, which are represented by M, are linearly independent, n equals m. If any of the input signals are dependent on the remaining input signals, then n usually will be less than capital M. So, at the end of stage 1, what we have done is we have separated the linearly independent signals from the dependent signals. Further, we have also expressed the dependent signals as a linear combination of the independent signals. So, that is about stage 1. Moving on to stage 2. In stage 2, we show that it is possible to construct a set of capital N orthonormal basis functions represented by phi 1 of t, phi 2 of t, etc. till phi n of t from the linearly independent signal set which is given by S1 of t, S2 of t till Sn of t. At the very starting, let us define the first basis function as phi 1 of t equals S1 of t divided by square root of E1, where E1 is the energy of the signal S1 of t, and rearranging this equation we can write S1 of t as square root of E1 multiplied by phi 1 of t. Let us represent square root of E1 by S11. Further, from equation 8, we note that the first basis function phi 1 of t has unit energy. So, that is about the construction of the first basis function. The first basis function is always given directly by the first signal divided by square root of its energy. Let us continue and find the second basis function. To define the second basis function, we must define a new intermediate function which is given by equation 10 here. That is, let us consider a new signal G2 of t which is given by S2 of t minus S21 into phi 1 of t. S21 is a coefficient and I will talk about this coefficient a little later. Very importantly, we must note the new intermediate signal that is defined must be orthogonal to the previously generated basis function which is phi 1 of t over the interval 0 to capital T. Then the second basis function can be given by the equation phi 2 of t equals G2 of t which is our intermediate function divided by square root of energy of G2 of t which is integral 0 to capital T G2 square of t dt. So, let us now substitute the RHS of equation 10. I am going to have S2 of t minus S21 into phi 1 of t replacing G2 of t. That will be integral 0 to capital T S2 of t minus S21 into phi 1 of t square. Let us split this. This is in the form of a minus b square. So, this will be a square plus b square minus 2ab. Then we are going to simplify the denominator term. You can see we have integral 0 to capital T S2 square of t dt. This is the energy of signal S2. Then we have integral S21 square into phi 1 square of t dt. Since S21 is a coefficient, integration cannot be applied to that. So, we will have S21 square multiplied by integral 0 to capital T phi 1 square of t dt. As per equation 3 what we have previously defined, integral of 0 to capital T phi 1 square of t dt is equals to 1 because our orthonormal basis functions are unit energy. Therefore, the denominator term here will only be consisting of S21 square. Then we will have the last term which is given by integration 0 to capital T 2 into S2 of t into S21 into phi 1 of t. Since 2 and S21 are constants, let us take them out of the integration. So, the integration will only be applicable to S2 of t into phi 1 of t. This simplification is illustrated in the equation here. That is, we are going to have in the denominator square root of integral 0 to capital T S2 square of t dt which is the energy of S2 of t plus S21 square into integral 0 to capital T phi 1 square of t dt which is 1 minus of 2 into S21 multiplied by S21. So, in the denominator we have E2 plus S21 square minus 2 into S21 multiplied by S21 which is 2 into S21 square. So, I can simplify this equation to obtain the final term for the second basis function as phi 2 of t equals S2 of t minus S21 into phi 1 of t whole divided by E2 which is the energy of the signal S2 of t minus of S21 square. This is the equation for the second basis function where E2 as already have defined is equal to integral 0 to capital T S2 square of t dt. Coming back to the equation 10 here, this is the intermediate function that was defined to create the second basis function. Since we have already made sure this signal is orthogonal to the first basis function, it therefore follows that the second basis function will also have unit energy. That is, integral 0 to capital T phi 2 square of t dt is equal to 1. Further, since g2 of t is orthogonal to phi 1 of t, therefore, it follows that the second basis function is orthogonal to the first basis function, which is given by the equation integral 0 to capital T phi 1 of t into phi 2 of t dt equals 0. That means, the two basis functions generated are orthogonal to each other, and therefore, they form an orthonormal set. I say it is orthonormal because we have made sure both of them have unit energy, plus they are orthogonal to each other. Right. So, that is how you can construct the second basis function. For the generation of third basis function, once again you are going to repeat the procedure what we have done for the second basis function. That is, you can start by defining a new intermediate function given by g3 of t, which can be written as s3 of t minus s31 into phi 1 of t minus s32 into phi 2 of t. And the procedure for the remaining steps simply expands in a very similar manner. So, continuing in this fashion, we may generalize the equations for g I of t, s I j and phi I of t as shown in the equations here. That is, every single time you want to create a new basis function, you have to define an intermediate function which is represented by g I of t, and it is given by s I of t minus of summation j varying from 1 to I minus 1 s I j into phi j of t. So, if you replace I is equals to 2, we will obtain the equation for g2 of t as we have created and written in equation 10 here. Then we are going to use this intermediate function to define the equation for the new basis function as g I of t divided by square root of the energy of g I of t, which is integral 0 to capital T g I square of t into dt. Here we have defined coefficients of expansion which are Sij, and you can estimate this coefficient using the equation integral 0 to capital T Si of t into phi j of t dt. Finally, we state that the basis functions so generated using the procedure discussed will create a orthonormal basis function set. Before I conclude, you must note, since we have shown that each one of the derived subset of the linearly independent signals, which are S1 of t, S2 of t, etc. till Sn of t, can be expressed as a linear combination of the orthonormal basis functions generated using the stage 2, which are phi 1 of t, phi 2 of t, etc. till phi n of t. It follows that each of the original set of signals, which are S1, S2 till S capital M of t, may also be expressed as a linear combination of the set of basis functions generated. This is directly implied from the stage 1. That is, at the end of the stage 1, I stated the dependent signals can be represented as a linear combination of independent signals. And since the independent signals are represented as a linear combination of the basis functions, it therefore follows that the original set of signals, which include the dependent signals, can also be expressed as a linear combination of the basis functions generated at stage 2. Right. So, that completes the proof of the Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure. I hope you liked this video. If you did, kindly press that like button and subscribe to my channel for more videos on digital communication. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.